Thank you, Sarah, and thank you everyone for joining us on the topic of positive safety. And we've had a really good response to this webinar. So it seems like it's an area of focus for a number of different individuals and organizations. So the big focus of positive safety today is looking at how we can shift the focus of safety from compliance to more culture and using safety as a positive lever for positive change. So Sarah did a great job of introducing me. We'll jump into the webinar in just a moment, but firstly, we would like to take this opportunity to do an acknowledgement of country. So Sentis acknowledges traditional custodians throughout Australia and recognise their connections to the land, waters and community. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today and pay our respects to elders past and present. We extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. We do this because we value Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander history, culture, and knowledge. Okay, so today we are focusing on how we can deliberately drive a positive safety culture within our organisation. And there are a few resources that we'll be aiming to share. We're going to try and get this particular checklist up into the chat, I believe. If we can't get into the chat, we'll circulate it later on. This is just a bit of a tool that you can use for collaborating and reviewing your own culture. If after this webinar you wanted to have a conversation within your business. For those of you who aren't familiar with Sentis, we are an organisation with a mission to change the lives of individuals and organisations for the better every day. We do that through the application of psychology and neuroscience to increase safety, to improve safety culture. So a particular focus on how to create fantastic safety leaders, how to get greater team engagement and safety, but also looking at the systems in which leaders and teams operate within, and ensuring that work is enabled and that people can flourish within the environments in which they work. So today we're going to cover off on, as I said, the concept of positive safety and what that means and how it can be applied practically within your organization. But to kick this off, I'd like to start with a bit of a poll to see where everyone's at. So the poll asks, how does the average worker in your organization experience safety? So do they think that safety is a backside covering exercise by management who only care when things go wrong? Do they see safety as a necessary evil? They do the bare minimum to manage themselves. Do they see safety as critical to looking out for colleagues, or do they actually see safety as an opportunity for more organizational commitment and to improve things overall? So again, if you were to jump inside the shoes of your average worker out there in the field and you were to try and imagine how some of them may be envisaging safety, what do you think would be the predominant mindset when it comes to safety? And then once we've got this poll completed, we'll share what some of our research showed around this as well.
Okay, we'll just give it about 5 more seconds. Sorry if that forces everyone to think too quickly.
Perfect.
Okay.
All right, and the results are in. So we can see that the vast majority of people on the line today are in those first two categories. It's a necessary evil or a bit of a backside covering exercise. So how's my maths? We're looking at about 78% of respondents sit within that category. And then we can see a couple of organizations where they've been able to create a culture where people can sort of see the why and what's in it for them and their peers a little bit more. They're really interesting results, and they're actually fairly reflective of the work that we've been doing globally over the last number of years. So if you sat within those first two categories, people within those categories would normally view their safety culture as predominantly negative, i.e. it's something that's done to them. It's all about moving away from harm. They feel that safety is something that's potentially sort of imposed onto them. They might feel that there's inconsistencies around the way culture is led and managed. So 86% of organizations, as we've found in our research, operate from a negative safety culture. And what we've actually done next is we've captured the sorts of comments that we hear from people operate from a negative safety culture. And they look like this. I can get my slide going. no one really cares about safety that much. It's all about policies, procedures, rules, and guidelines. It's a backside covering exercise. There's some colorful language, as you can hear. You've got safety is below production. If something goes wrong, there's a blame game. People having negative experiences around reporting, fear-based motivations for safety. People have been fired and heavily disciplined because of safety. Really some significant air quality issues in one particular site there, as you can see. And often a sense that something significant needs to occur before safety is taken seriously. Now, if we apply this particular model or those particular attitudes to a really crucial model that we use all the time, you can see how these attitudes can play out on a day-to-day basis. So for those of you who aren't familiar with this model, this is an attitudes, behavior, results model that we use a lot in the work that we do with the organizations that we partner with. And what this model says is that our attitudes, the way we think and feel, drives our behavior, and then that determines our results. And often those results will reinforce those attitudes, and you tend to find that this model spirals in a particular direction. Now, this model is really relevant and really important when you place goals to it, because if you've got a particular goal, but our attitudes aren't matching that goal, you can actually find that individual attitudes shift away from the goal. And as a result, the culture shifts away from the goal. And you can sort of see from some of those comments how an organization might espouse, I guess, a value of safety and really focus on maybe reducing the lag indicators around safety. But if their behaviors don't marry up to, I guess, the language they use in the results that they say that they're sharing, then the attitudes of the organization will be reflected, will start to shift in a negative way. So as an example, if I feel that safety is purely done as a backside covering exercise by management, and they only care when something goes wrong, or they only care when the production pressure isn't too high, what we tend to see from a behavior perspective is that people will be less likely to follow policies and procedures and rules and guidelines, and in fact, less likely to put in discretionary effort around safety, because safety is something that's done to them, and it's not something that they perceive that is more broadly valued. The result of that is a typically more unsafe culture. We see more incidents, more accidents, and things like that occur. Now, if the management then responds to that behavior with an attitude of, again, blame and punishment, you can see how this model can start to feed back within itself, and organizations get really stuck. They get really stuck in a space of safety where they feel like they're just going round and round in a circle, and anything they do as a safety initiative is short-lived and low impact. And you get that kind of concept that safety is a sugar hit. Why is that happening, and what can we do about it? So that's a big part of this positive safety focus, shifting the focus of safety from being something that's done to people, this kind of negative kind of orientation that we commonly see play out, being all about this kind of stuff on the screen, to one that people can see the value in, and that encourages leaders to think, I guess, more broadly and more holistically around what it actually means to create a safe environment for people. Because what we're going to suggest is that the way that people experience safety is probably more than the physical kind of safety that we typically focus on within organizations. I think when you talk to safety departments, you do risk assessments and all those sorts of things. Again, it's about managing often physical hazards that can, permanently disable, disfigure, or even, harm people into the future. And obviously that's really, really important. We do not want to be hurting people. And I think if you're on this call, I'd be confident in saying that you've got a really strong value, that you feel that the organization and leadership doing what it can to help keep people safe is really, really crucial. What we often don't necessarily think about as we're focusing on improving physical safety, and this is from sort of a lot of research that we've done, and I think the regulator has in fact acknowledged this as well, is that in focusing on physical safety, it can be actually quite easy to overlook psychological safety and also social safety. So when we talk about social safety, we're talking about the sense of security that people have in their relationships and interactions with others. So do they feel like they've got strong relationships with their peers? That sense of collaboration and engagement? Do they feel like their leaders value and respect them? Are they clear from bullying and harassment? Do they feel pressured to do things that they don't feel comfortable doing? All those sorts of elements would fit into the social category. And the psychological category talks to the extent to which individuals feel confident to express their thoughts and opinions without negative consequences. So do people feel like they can speak up and offer suggestions, stop work, even take calculated risks around new ways of innovating and putting things together without feeling like there's going to be unwanted consequences for them? So what we're really encouraging through the concept of positive safety, and again, reinforced by some of the newly refreshed legislation in Australia and probably more broadly through things like the ISO 45003 and things like that, is looking at safety more broadly than physical and considering in every decision that we make the psychological and social implications and opportunities that are tied to the way that we lead safety. So what we know from the research we've done is that there's a huge overlay between each of these, and each of these elements of safety have the ability to add value to the other, but also subtract from one another and actually create, I guess, less safety more broadly for the individual. So if we were to take an example of this, I attended a pre-start meeting a little while ago with a lines company. And this particular lines company was talking about positive communications between people in the bucket and people on the ground, and particularly when they're around busy streets and different things like that. And they were finding that they were yelling up and down at the time, and they're having trouble hearing. They felt like there was a risk of things being potentially missed. So there was a very strong focus on increasing the physical safety whilst on the job site. And really great conversation. Now the leader kicked off by then inviting the group at the toolbox talk to participate in a conversation and talk about, well, what can we do to innovate this, make it better, make it more useful. Actually, in that moment, I think, you beauty, this leader's, creating a space for psychological and social safety. We've got an opportunity here. So a couple of people throw out ideas. He's facilitating the conversation well and going, yes, this is, we're getting positive momentum. Then an apprentice speaks up and offers, he's a gamer, and he offered a sort of a solution around headsets. And the way the leader responded to him was to say, mate, you've been here for 15 minutes. You don't know what you're talking about. Pull your head in. No one wants to hear about your stupid gaming. And, the group laughs. That particular person is diminished. And in fact, the whole conversation stopped there. No one else is willing to speak up from that particular moment. So in the course of one conversation, I actually saw a leader facilitate a conversation that had the ability to improve the overall physical, social, and psychological safety of the group, and then diminished it down to zero in a second. And there'll be many, many, many examples of this that play out. And not all like that. If we think about incident investigations, the way we conduct an incident investigation will impact on not only physical controls that may be put into in the future, but how people experience social and psychological safety. And the list of these goes on. The objective is, if a leader and an organization can be thinking more holistically about safety, more completely about safety, and encompassing all these areas and definitions of safety, we actually have an opportunity to increase individual and organizational resilience, reliability, capacity, and overall discretionary effort. So by discretionary effort, we're talking about people going above and beyond for safety, going above and beyond for the organization. So we think there's a huge opportunity for a lot of organizations to redefine safety, particularly again in the light of the new refreshed legislation, and focus on safety more holistically, including all these areas, because all areas of safety impact on one another so significantly. So that is how an individual may experience safety on a day-to-day basis, but of course, how an individual experiences safety, that doesn't happen in a void. That happens within a culture which people operate within. So at Sentis, we use this model adapted from some of the work from Dr. Scott Geller that talks about the total safety culture model. And what this total safety culture model does is gives us a useful high-level reference point to think about the different aspects of safety culture that may influence on how an individual experiences and engages with safety. So to break this down a little bit more, you can see there's 4 components. So the 4 components include the person component. So this is individual skills, teamwork, intelligence, motivation, attitudes, and abilities. We've got practices. So this is your policy procedures, your risk assessments, your toolbox talks, training, safety interactions. We've got the environment. So it's mostly your physical controls, plus your housekeeping, your engineering, your planning, designing. And you can see around the outside of that model, the gray line of leadership. Now, a big focus of this model and a big focus of creating a positive safety culture sits with leadership, because leadership will impact on every other element of the safety culture model in the way that they build a strong foundation for safety to make sure that they've got the basics to do the job well, by making database decisions, keeping safety simple, focusing on making decisions using the safety data that's provided to them to make an organizational impact, leading with the vision, being curious and hunting the good stuff. The way leaders interpret and lead around the other elements of safety are going to have such a huge impact, not only on the way people experience physical safety, but psychological safety, and of course, social safety. So let's talk a little bit about culture and cultural maturity. If you've got your phone with you, here's an opportunity for a bit of interaction. If you've got your phone, you can scan the screen there, and that's a QR code. Just put your camera on, scan it, and then click the link on the screen, and that will open up a safety culture maturity quiz. So this is a little bit of a self-assessment that gives you a heat map about where your culture will be at, and it will give you a bit of a cultural gauge across each of those 4 elements of safety culture. And again, it's not a comprehensive and complete measure of your culture, but it is just a little bit of a quiz to get you starting to have a think about where might your organization be sitting across all of these areas. So when we talk about safety culture at Sentis, we talk about these 5 levels of safety culture maturity. And within one organization, you may have all 5 of these areas, but you'll have a sort of an area on average where the organization will sit. The usefulness in a model like this is as an internal anchoring point, particularly when you break down culture into its antecedents or its drivers. You can then be quite targeted in how you target initiatives. But to give you a high level of this model and how it interacts with how individuals experience safety. At Counterproductive, what we're experiencing around safety is that safety is very much something that is done to people. People don't feel like the company actually cares that much about safety, and in turn, don't tend to value safety that much themselves. And that in these cultures, you'll tend to kind of get a focus of every person out for themselves, and not a great amount of team unity and focus on organizational outcomes. At public compliance, you've probably got a management team that has been told it needs to drive safety and will do so. Yeah, it'll often be a sort of a fear and blame and punishment approach to safety. And the result will be of this sort of top-down approach to safety, that you'll get different safety behaviors when management is and isn't looking. You may even get different safety behaviors depending on the amount of production pressure that an organization is experiencing, because you might find that leaders in these environments turn a blind eye if we've got to get something online in a hurry, and there's commercials tied to that. At private compliance, you're starting to see a shift. This is the sort of the turning point for organizations. At private compliance, you're starting to see the personal why and what's in it for me around safety. So you do start to get more independent buy-in to safety. At collaborative, you're starting to see teams work together to solve problems and look out for one another. You're starting to see greater levels of psychological safety and trust and social safety, so people feel like they can have conversations about what's best for each other and what's best for the business. And at citizenship, you've actually sort of broken through to that really awesome level where teams are solving problems, but then rolling it up to an organizational level so that the whole organization can benefit. And you know, you're working towards that common goal of safe and productive outcomes, and you start to see more discretionary effort and more sense of a shared responsibility around safety. So we've been doing this at this culture kind of work at Sentis for 20 years, and I've been at Sentis doing that culture work for about 15 of those years. And what we see over and over and over again is that organizations stall at that counterproductive and public compliance space. And what we're seeing as the big opportunity here for organizations is they get stuck or they get stalled because they forget to focus on creating a psychological and socially safe environment that supports people to actually push past private compliance and to be able to collaborate and to be able to share learnings more broadly. And yeah, when you get stuck in those lower levels, it feels like a constant game of whack-a-mole where you're just solving problems and resolving issues and policing safety all of the time. And I think when you get stuck at this point, you know, often it's driven out of like frustration and even a sense of futility, where it's like, well, if only these people, a sense of futility that maybe, you know, what's wrong with people? Why do they keep making these mistakes? And there's that real headspace and that real sense that the people within your organization are an army of problems that need to be fixed and need to be resolved. And whenever that is an underlying attitude or headspace for leaders, you're going to get stuck at that public compliance space, because to break through to that next threshold, we need to be thinking about safety, again, more broadly than just physical safety. So I'll unpack that a little bit more. So what does that look like to start to create that shift and that bounce and to break through that private compliance space? So when we talk about culture, when we think about culture, a really easy way or a high level way of thinking about culture and that cutoff point is to think about the cultures on the left being predominantly externally locused around safety. So externally locused about safety refers to the driver for improved safety and performance being something that sits outside of me. Again, we're doing this just because we have to be compliant. We're doing this because the board has told us to. We're doing this because the regulator has cracked down on this at the moment. We're doing this because our insurance costs have gone through the roof. And what tends to happen when you've got external motivators to drive particular behaviors is that leaders and organizations will focus on not shifting it to an, we'll focus on external controls to continue to try and improve things. And you get stuck in this circular piece where, you know, we want people to take on more responsibility, more accountability, but we're not really creating an environment that supports that because of the way we're conducting that. I'll give you an example. You know, in the cost kind of culture, we're focusing on what not to do. So lots of conversations out there about don't get hurt, don't do this, don't break that rule. You know, a huge focus on the absence of harm. Don't get hurt. You know, that's what safety is about. Safety is an absence of harm. Don't get hurt no matter what you do. It's lag indicator focus. It's about correct and control. It's about blaming often. It's really error and mistake focused. You know, you're going out there and you're hunting a mistake. Again, it tends to not only focus on a blame culture overall, but if something does go wrong, you know, who's the individual that's made accountable? And often that call will be coming right from the board. Top down, it's about hiding issues and it's about black and white rules. So you can see here, you know, all these things focus on consequences and compliance. And look, we do want compliance, and yep, there are some decisions that people make that will need to make consequences. But If that is the only tool in our tool belt, if our only tool is a hammer, then everything becomes a nail, and that's where organizations get stuck. What we are seeing organizations who are able to break through the private compliance threshold and beyond start to think about and start to do is that they start to shift the conversation. It's more about empowerment. It's more about safety as a personal investment. There's more focus on the why and the what's in it for me, because the whole intent of shifting cultural maturity is to shift from a culture where we're having to police safety, where safety is something that people intrinsically value. You know, they're engaging in safe behaviors because they can understand the why and the what's in it for me, and they're looking out for their work colleagues and for the organization for very similar reasons. In order to do that, there's some certain things that these more mature organizations tend to focus on. They focus, you know, a lot on what to do. You know, it's not a focus on just don't get hurt no matter what you do. It's focusing on, well, we're going to empower you to make safe choices through giving you some clear and achievable behaviors or actions that you can engage with to increase the presence of safety for yourself and for the organization. There's a more significant focus on capacity and capability. Lots of conversations around empowering and collaborating. So we've got a problem to solve here. How do we solve this together? Getting the workers most exposed to the risk or doing the work involved in coming up with those conversations. It's not just about focusing on mistakes. It's also about learning from success and going out there and saying, well, every day we're probably walking past many things that we're doing really well. So how do we hunt the good stuff, learn from that, and expand it more broadly across the organization? Take a more systemic view of safety and take best practice from one part and share it across the business, so that the systems of work that you're creating facilitate safer choices for the people that work within the business. It's about putting yourself in the shoes of the worker, and as opposed to black and white rules, it's really about creating a freedom within a framework. So we do want to provide, you know, clear guidelines, clear expectations. You know, we need to educate people and give them training on what the risks, what the hazards are, what the controls are, what's in their sphere of control and sphere of influence. We also want to be able to create time and space for people to have conversations about how they solve problems and do it deliberately. And you know, if the policy and procedure doesn't work or doesn't fit and doesn't suit, you know, what's the freedom within the framework that we can provide that empowers them to make the right choice at the right time with the right level of supervision? So if you find that you're predominantly sitting within that red zone culture and you're looking to create a deliberate shift to the green zone, and I use the word deliberately very specifically and very carefully, because unless it's done deliberately, it won't shift. People don't necessarily naturally have an internal locus of control. It's easy to blame people. It's easy to avoid accountability. Unless you make a deliberate shift to that internal locus of control, you're going to get more of whatever you're getting. So how do you turn it? How do you turn it around, and how do you use safety as even a potential lever to improve culture more broadly? So what have we seen done well? Safety is an absolute cracking opportunity to improve organizational culture more maturity, more broadly. And the reason for that is for a few reasons. One is safety is a universal. You know, I think it's fair to make an assumption that most, if not all, of your employees don't go to work with the intent of getting harmed. Yes, there might be an odd percent here and there, but that's certainly not going to be your critical mass, particularly not in modern society, in Australia anyway. So safety is a universal that we can have as a unifying cause. It's a great opportunity for leaders to demonstrate care, tangible care, and to demonstrate and role model leadership. And in doing that, you're able to create a greater cultural reciprocity. People who feel respected are more likely to give respect. People who feel valued are more likely to value. So yeah, if you're waiting for your teams just to one day flip the switch on this, it's not going to happen. It starts with us as leaders.
Anthony, we might have lost your sound. Anthony, can you hear me? You are on mute. I don't know if that, right. Okay, well, we'll just hold on a second, everyone, if we can just sort out what is happening.
All right, Sarah, is that working?
Yeah, that's working. A little bit different, but good enough.
I've had a glitch. Apologies, everyone. We're learning on the fly here. Okay, so where do I get up to, Sarah? How do I explain this slide?
Yes, Anthony, I think Cassie might better tell you that, where you're up to.
Yeah, we lost you probably halfway through the slide, so we got halfway there.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we'll kick back in. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. I'm back. So thank you for hanging on, everyone. I will check out my hardware after this to see what's going on. So where I was up to was basically talking about that safety is a great lever to move culture more broadly within an organization. So it's a great unifying course because you can make the assumption that most people don't go to work to get hurt. It's a great opportunity for leaders to practically demonstrate care, and people who feel cared for are more likely to care back. So you create that sense of reciprocity. It's also a really practical way of leaders being able to demonstrate humility, respect, and curiosity with people that they work with. In fact, safety goes back to what is at core to us as human beings. And as a psychologist by training, I can't help but pull out an old psychology model. Now, up here, we've got an adaptation of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And safety actually is one of the core elements of what is crucial to us as human beings, being able to function at our best at all levels and to hit our optimized potential. So what are some ways that we can start to think about creating a positive safety culture? Well, we've done a bunch of lit reviews and our own studies, and we've come up with these 8 principles of a positive safety culture for you to consider and reflect on as part of your organizational strategy. And again, all this will be made available to you afterwards as well. So the 8 principles are: build a strong foundation, keep it simple, make database decisions, lead with a vision, actively care, be curious, make an impact, and hunt good stuff. So let's unpack those a little bit more. If we start with lead with a vision, what we know from our own research, and if I flick ahead a slide, is that organizations that are able to break through that private compliance space and move more into the collaborative and beyond levels of mateship have a very, very strong safety mission and vision. Often that feeds through to the values of an organization, and the management team is bought in to that mission and vision. So you can see there that the significant impacts of safety, mission and vision and management safety commitment can have on that ability to mature an organizational safety culture. So a good starting point here is have a clear safety mission and vision, link your behaviors and performance metrics to that vision, use the vision regularly to make the right decisions, and use safety as a lever for positive cultural change and transformation. So if you've got safety as part of your vision, that's an automatic way of linking decisions and the organizational outcomes to align to what's in it for me, for the people within the organization. One of the questions we will often get around leading with a vision is, with high levels of turnover, particularly in the C-suites of organizations, how do you maintain a vision? And I think a lot of that is about looking at, well, how do you bring the vision and the values into your business strategy and into your everyday decision making? If it's something that you're talking about as part of a routine, as part of your your pre-starts, or your toolbox talks, or your strategy meetings, or all those sorts of things, and you bring them to life and you're saying, okay, if we're making that decision, how does that align with our vision? You'll find that there's an opportunity that you're bringing your vision and your values off the wall and you're operationalizing them. You can also reward and recognize around this. You can have vision and values, behavioral reward and recognition tools. There's a whole bunch of different activities that you can do to bring the vision to life. But I think having a plan and a strategy for one, building the vision, getting that commitment, and then maintaining it is something that can create a great positive culture outcome. The next one is building a strong foundation. So again, what we're encouraging organizations to think about is to go back to their foundations of safety and say, all right, what's the lens we've been looking at safety with? And is it a holistic view of safety? Have we considered physical, psychological, and social aspects of safety in the way we've designed work, provided resources, and have set safety up? Have we enabled those elements of safety to come to life through giving our leaders and team members the skills, the capacity, and the capability to actually engage and understand what that means for them? And a big part of understanding that experience is to take a user view of the systems and the environment that people work within. So you can do that through getting out in the field and seeing our pre-start meetings and toolboxes are run, talking to your people, asking them, how physically, psychologically, and socially safe they feel in certain environments. And you can also do things like culture and climate surveys, which we're able to provide really clear and precise insights to people about those three elements of safety and how people are experiencing that. And then you can build your strategies to ensure that foundation is rock solid. There's been a lot of talk about things like safety clutter and concepts like that. Again, our research and our experience is very much along the same lines. It's about how do you keep safety as simple as possible. So how do you rely less on administrative actions or more rules and instead create mechanisms and forums for people to have discussions and solve problems? Again, coming back to that concept of freedom within a framework. How do we set those up in a way that we can create continuous improvement and make positive changes? And lastly here, I think for a lot of organizations in creating that shift, focusing on the critical few is a really great opportunity. So with a lot of organizations we've been working with, we've really encouraged them to shift to a critical control focus and doing deep dives into high potential incidents as opposed to every incident that occurs. And what we've found is by focusing on those elements and telling that story that we're going to focus on the most significant things that can harm us. We're not saying that the other incidents aren't important, we don't want to reduce them, but you can help people feel like they're contributing to things that will have the most significant impact on the organization. It also means that when we're going out there as leaders and having conversations, you've got much clearer anchoring points to have control verification or general in-field interaction conversations around. And you can focus your feedback loop on those areas more clearly and get more significant improvements more quickly. We actually had feedback from a recent organization by creating that shift that then had a flow-on effect to the way they ran incident investigations and the frequency they ran incident investigations. And then as a result, we've found that near-miss reporting and incident reporting has actually gone up, and they're getting a whole lot of more valuable data as a result of that simplification of focus. Now, once you get that data, it's really important to do something with it. So what a big challenge often is how do you make database decisions? And it's a really tricky thing to differentiate between data and opinion and perspective and at different times. So data is crucial. And really getting in behind the data and challenging, well, what does that data actually tell us, and what decisions can we make with that data? And how do we adapt our plan and our decisions based on that data over time? And then how do we communicate what we're doing with that data and ensure whether it's working or not working? An example of this, again, recently for one organization, we went in and did some cultural diagnostic work with them that told them
some of the areas of improvement. We then had a look at their incident data that they'd collected. And what we had found is that the top 5 or 6 critical risks, two of the actual most significant critical risks, according to the data they were getting, weren't even part of their critical control framework. And there was a whole lot of misunderstanding about the difference between injury potential and the actual consequence of incidents. And by getting into the data, looking at it from a different lens and interpreting it, we're able to tell a different story to the board and to the business, which has made much more high quality decisions, which has impacted on their serious injury and fatality potential rate, as well as our overall LTI rate as well. Actively caring, again, safety is an opportunity for us to demonstrate care and create that sense of reciprocity. So, going out there and having conversations, and promoting a culture that is psychologically and socially safe, so we can challenge one another, give each other feedback, and look for continuous improvement is really, really crucial. Again, if we're expanding the definition of safety from being simply about physical safety to well-being or psychological and social safety, giving leaders the tools to be able to check in with one another, and also giving peers the tools and permission to check in with one another is really, really crucial. Being curious. So as leaders, we can get addicted to having all of the answers or feeling like we need to have all of the answers. What we've found that is more with organizations who've been able to break through that maturity threshold is that leaders in general are entering the space with a I'm okay, you're okay headspace, and they're not making assumptions. They're not assuming they've got all the information. So that frame means that when they're out there engaging with people, they're able to look at incidents from different angles. They're able to put themselves in the shoes and go, well, if I was in that position, may have I made a similar decision? They're able to seek to learn. They're able to go up to operators, been doing this for a bunch of years, and say, tell us, what's your take on this? What's your lens on this? How could we improve it? There's a much more of a significant focus on playing the ball and not the person. So as opposed to focusing on that person's a frustrating person, it's about saying, well, this is a frustrating challenge, or this is a problem that we need to solve. Let's focus on that. And the system of work that we're creating that sits around that. It's about seeing incidents as an opportunity to grow, and a lot of this is about questioning the status quo. Again, it feeds nicely into data. Just because this is the way that we've always done it, is this the right way to do it? Making an impact, another significant one here. So this is about actually, a lot of this is about firstly doing something meaningful with the data that you get, so that you're demonstrating that you do actually care. But a lot of this is about thinking about safety as being more than just about work. What we know is that more than ever, people's work lives and home lives, they cross over, and particularly with the psychosocial hazard conversations that we're having, a big conversation is, well, if someone's going through a personal crisis, how are we supposed to do something about that at work? But it is about viewing the person as a whole person, understanding that one doesn't operate independently of another, and asking ourselves our 50% about how do we create a culture and a climate that can support people through their peaks and their troughs. It is also about expanding that sense of corporate social responsibility from to include ESG in general, and being more mission and purpose focused. And lastly, hunt the good stuff. Again, universally one of the most significant areas of opportunity across all the organizations that we work with, all the leadership assessments that we run, regardless of industry. Team members rate their leaders as this being one of their most significant areas of opportunity. So, when we hunt the good stuff, we're going out there going, well, what's the potential of our people? How do we focus on the presence of safety? Are we walking past a whole lot of positive things that we could be reinforcing and supporting? It's about going out and having positive conversations with people about, what can we do to support and enable work? It is about acknowledging the experience of workers and bringing them in to find the right solution instead of focusing on top down. It's about building, in doing that, you can build the trust of your people, and it's about fundamentally having a frame that, all people are imperfect, but at the core, we're well-intentioned and we have the potential within our business to have an army of problem solvers as opposed to an army of problems. So there'll be a whole lot more webinars to come on unpacking some of these concepts. But the data that we've pulled from, particularly around the drivers of a positive safety culture, is really broad, as you can see. 73 operational sites, 8 industries, huge sample group. And if we really want to shift from heavy focuses on safety procedures, a perception that managers aren't committed to safety, a sense that there's knee-jerk reactions to safety, which is internal context, a fear and blame culture, which drives a lack of willingness to report incidents and errors, and team members not feeling recognized for their positive safety contributions. We do need to take a different lens on the way we think about safety and safety culture. So I'm going to open up for chat, for questions in just a moment. Just while we're sort of enabling people to put any of those questions into the chat, we shared the QR code a little bit earlier on. If you'd like to be sent a link to this QR code, hit yes, and we'll shoot you a note after this. The way we're seeing a lot of organizations using this tool is to start a conversation within their leadership team. So it's a really easy to engage with, fast tool that you can run with a group of leaders and then have a conversation about your respective results. Create a bit of dissonance. What do you think we're doing well? What do you think we're not doing well? Why do you think that's the case? Is there anything that we might need to dig into deeper as an organization if we want to create a positive safety culture? So if you are thinking that you wouldn't mind getting a bit of a better finger on where your safety culture is at, and you want to start a bit of dissonance or a bit of a conversation within your business, click yes. And obviously, if you don't need that sent to you, just click no. You can obviously also scan the QR code and you'll get a link to the website as well. The next opportunity here is if you would like to get more information around our safety climate survey process, which is going to help inform your strategy for creating a positive safety culture, hit yes, and Fergus will be in touch and we can get you some more information around what it would look like to engage with that process. You can also go to our website, heaps of information on there. There's a resource called Driving a Positive Safety Culture, which also fleshes out some of those key drivers of cultural maturity in more detail that we just spoke about earlier. So give you some time to click yes or no to that. And I'll just take a quick look at our questions. If we've got any come through. All right. So we've got a question here that says, if there is no total buy-in from top management, it's very difficult to do much, just sweet words. People feel that deeply, you can't mask and manipulate their care, either you do or you don't. I wonder how many CEOs and board members watch this one today or will watch. Yeah, look, 100%. And a lot of focus is often put on the C-suite and executive of organizations to create this change. It starts at the board from my perspective, because of the role that boards play within a lot of organizations that we work with. So I think if you've got a challenging executive or you've got a challenging board, sending them things like this is really useful. Obviously, you've got some burning platforms around psychosocial hazards and things that they need to do something with at the moment. Also, the critical control framework or critical risk can be another lever that you can pull to escalate that, because there's obviously some potential personal repercussions on those board members if they don't manage those risks adequately. So yeah, good opportunity. If you are there, keep chipping away, and obviously share resources like that if useful. What is the difference between work culture and safety culture? Look, really good question. You could probably say that safety culture is a subcategory of a broader organizational culture. But I think within a lot of the industries and organizations that we work with, they really do deal with them in very much a similar sort of framework. So because again, safety is such a great universal kind of element, you can tie your values, you can tie your vision to it, you can demonstrate care. And there's not a huge amount of difference in terms of leadership competencies, for example, between safety leadership and general leadership. You might add in innovation as a general leadership competency, or there might be a couple of other differences, but the overlap is really significant. So I think for heavy industries where you've got the potential for serious harm or injury, safety is just a really obvious and great opportunity to shift culture more broadly. Next one, any guidance or suggestions on managing and supporting a positive safety culture where it is extremely difficult for management, visibility, rig sites, internationally? Yeah, look, I think it's a good question, because management safety commitment in our culture diagnostic results comes through often as one of the most significant weaknesses for organizations, but often so will consultation and collaboration. So again, it depends on your organizational outcomes, but if you've got opportunities to bring managers and teams together to solve specific and targeted problems, or get on working groups and feel like they've got that line of sight, particularly for those spread out sites, that may be another opportunity, and if leaders can then conduct themselves in those forums in a humble and positive way, and engage with those key stakeholders from across the business, you do have the ability to create a positive sentiment. So I think it's about thinking outside the box for a lot of this perceived safety management commitment issue, and going, okay, is it all just about managers being in field, or are there other mechanisms that we can use to help team members come up with solutions and engage with those leaders in different forums? So I challenge you to have a think about that. Each organization's sort of situation is going to be a little bit different there. Next one, care is an inner value. Can we teach it to leaders, or is it something we do or we don't have? Look, it's a tricky one. I think one of the opportunities you've got with leadership and leadership groups is to leverage experience to create dissidence across a group. And I was with a group delivering a session on Tuesday, and there was a leader there who shared an experience where he lost a dear friend due to a motorbike accident. And then he also himself had been involved in some pretty high potential incidents. And he said that those experiences changed his life forever and changed his lens of safety, as well as attending some of the programs like the ones that we run at Sentis. I think the opportunity is, if you can create a forum, and I used to do this in drug and alcohol rehabilitation and in my other clinical settings, if you can create a forum where you're having a conversation about a common topic, but you're asking people to share their lenses on that, you can create huge kind of light bulb moments for people who perhaps viewed the world in one way, but now can view it in a completely different way because they've been given someone else's context. So we often talk about the concept of safety as a cost, or safety as a currency. I still remember one of the programs I ran in South Africa where, one of the leaders shared, the moment when he had to knock on someone's door and inform the family of one of the team members who didn't get to go home from work that day, and the chill that went across the room, and some of the younger people, coming up and talking to him afterwards, and and the passion and obviously the imprint that it created for him was so significant. So I think if you're finding that there's a sense that people don't care, there will be people who do care. And as leaders and as a business, we can tell people all day, you got to care, you got to care, you got to care. But what will make the impact is the stories in the space. So facilitating environments where people can share stories, have the space, and undergo what we call a reframing process around safety is, you can get some pretty big impacts on that pretty quickly, and you can create some inner value, I think, around safety. All right, just see if there's any more questions that are popping up here. I think we've captured.
There is just a little bit of feedback, Anthony. So Wendy said, thanks, Anthony. Very good discussion on how to change the safety culture. We'll definitely be taking on some of your recommendations in my day-to-day work as a health and safety advisor. And also from Alexander, thank you. Agree with many of this. I hear this regularly from many workers that I try and train, embed a safety-focused mind that needs to be shared when they go back into their workplace. And I will add, please stay tuned for that email later with the link to the event page. It will have the slides on and a video and a podcast, which is great for sharing. You might want to share it with some of those directors and board members too.
100%. Look, thank you for really thoughtful questions. Really appreciate everyone's input. That adds a lot of value to the conversation more broadly. And thanks again for having us, Sarah. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
There's another one tomorrow, by the way, 9:30 in the morning. We had to squeeze 2 in this week. So that'll be Kelvin again from Art of Work. So thank you, everyone. Bye.
All right. Thank you. Bye.